Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Path to the Future, a very special program leading up to the Summit of the Future. My name is Denver Kisting, and Tatiana Shipao is our sign language interpreter, and I have a very special co-host this evening. I will allow her in a short bit to introduce herself. First up, we'll introduce our panel for you this evening. Madame Mupalang Pororo, the UN Resident Coordinator in Namibia. Greetings, ma'am, and welcome to this very special program.
Thank you so much, Denver, and I'm very glad to be here this evening.
We're glad to have you this evening.
Thank you.
Another special guest, of course, Ambassador Jerome Kakeka Shanika, Deputy Executive Director, responsible for multilateral relations in the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation. Good evening, sir, and welcome to this very special program.
Good evening, Denver. Good evening to the viewers. I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here this evening.
Thank you very much for being happy for me.
Our last, but certainly not our least panelist, a very special guest also this evening, Mr. Mahongora Kaviwa, Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress of Namibia. Greetings to you, sir, and welcome to this very special program.
Good evening, and I'm very pleased to be with you this evening and also to the viewers.
It's always a pleasure, it's always a delight to have you in our midst.
Very much.
Yeah. I think the moment of truth has arrived for me to hand over to my very special co-host to introduce herself to you.
Well, a very good evening, Namibia. Thank you so much for tuning in on NBC1. My name is Ndapewa Ambabi, and I am the one with the audience. We have an audience made up of students from the University of Namibia, the Namibia University of Science and Technology, as well as Triumphant College. Hi, guys. Hey. Thank you so much for joining us. We are talking about the Summit of the Future as we address some of the pressing global challenges. And before we get into the conversation, you can also join us by calling in on 061-291-3339. 061-291-3339. Denver, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Ndapewa, and a very good evening and a warm welcome to you and your lovely audience. Before we get into the particulars of this evening's conversation, bearing in mind what Ndapewa had shared with you, that you may also participate in this evening's conversation, we'll take a look at an insert depicting, outlining exactly what is the Summit of the Future.
The Summit of the Future is designed for the leaders of the world to take a look at the whole global architecture, at how we do international cooperation, and to make it better. The most important ingredient is trust. The Summit is going to adopt 3 agreements: a pact for the future, a global digital compact, and a declaration on future generations. The Pact for the Future has 5 chapters on sustainable development, peace and security, youth and future generations, science and technology, and transforming global governance. You look at the UN and you think governments are the key players, and that's true. They're the ones sitting around the table, but they do so on behalf of their people. Civil society actors, young people have been involved throughout and will be at the summit. Private sector will be here in recognition of the massive role they have in shaping people's lives and opportunities today. This summit is for and by everyone, and everyone should see themselves reflected in it. The summit is not just 4 days in September. Most of the seeds that we plant at this summit will take some time to grow and flourish, and all of us have to be involved in holding governments responsible for living up to their commitments on the international stage. It's going to take all of us to make this summit a success.
Welcome back to this very special program called Path to the Future, and we're going to get right into it. Madam Pororo, having heard some of those voices in the insert, particularly as far as accountability is concerned, what I take away from it is that we can only reach the Sustainable Development Goals if we have all hands on deck. So we have to hold ourselves individually and collectively accountable. And by far the most important ingredient we heard was trust. What do you make of that?
Okay, thank you for the point, Denver, and really I think at the end of the day, trust is what is going to bring us together, to be accountable and also to see what our governments are doing. And one of the chapters of the Pact of the Future talks about transforming global governance. And there, I think the main issue then is when we look at the structures which have been in place, they've worked for the past 80 years, but they're no longer working today. So in order for us then to really want to see us moving to a higher level in terms of our development, we need to have that trust, because when we look at it too, right now we have this whole this divide, yeah, across the world, where you find when it comes, for example, we can talk of access to resources, you find that the developed world has more access to resources than the developing world. And yet we are talking about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals at a global level. So if we are really going to be serious about reaching those objectives or reaching those goals, which already we have noted that we are already lagging behind with many of them, it's going to have to take us to come together, work together, and trust one another. A lot of what we see in the world with all the crises that are happening, I think it's because trust has broken down. So the question now is, how can we rebuild that trust? And this is what then, at the Summit of the Future, will be some of the discussions which then are deriving straight from that pact as well.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, having heard Madam Pororo say that the playing field is not equal for the developed versus the developing world, yet the onus is on all of us to implement these goals, many of which are lagging behind as we sit here this evening. What is your take?
Thank you very much. I think the Summit of the Future presents an opportunity, as the Secretary General said, it's once in a generation, to demonstrate that multilateralism can work for the better. And it has been proven that multilateralism is the best way to address the problem that's confronting us if we work together, if we restore that trust, so that each and everyone, mind you, the Charter of the United Nations, it is speaking to we, the people. And it is we, the people, that should be reflected in anything that the Pact of the Future that the leaders are going to agree. If I do not see myself through the mirror, then I'm afraid I will not be saying I'm among the group. So therefore, we need to have the SDGs that have been lagging behind. Some of the excuses have been that the COVID-19 disrupted the implementations.
Do you concur with that excuse?
Well, to the large extent, it has set back, but I don't believe that it is purely the reason why we have not achieved, because the implementation, it is about 12–14%.
So if you are saying you don't believe that COVID-19 is fully responsible for the slow pace at which we are implementing these goals, what really, according to you, is the motivation behind this?
Because the implementations has to be applied at national level, and there are countries that perhaps need to be assisted. They need to be assisted, and in which way they can be assisted.
Thank you.
So, I mean, let us look at the digital divide. Are we all on the same level? It is not, and it has demonstrated. I mean, we have the global governance, which is not fair. Are we all represented in the Security Council on the same level? It is not.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
when these decisions are made, they are affecting one part of the world or another. But it's not, the playing field is not leveled.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kabiwa, what is your take on the Summit of the Future and the pace at which we have been trying to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, bearing in mind that we've just heard that the playing field is not level?
Thank you very much for your question. Allow me first to quote the UN Secretary General, who said that we can't build the future for our grandchildren with a system that was built for our grandparents, which means that all the arrangements that we have are completely outdated, and we need to redefine so that we know that group, which we call the young people, and those that are coming, what do they want and what is their desire. And also the very good part also that there will also be declarations on the future generation, which I don't know to what extent are the young people themselves were involved in it and how do we visualize it. Now, the global architect system, it was using or operating then, because all these systems are coming as far as 1940 something. And now things have changed completely. That's why the reform of all the global architect systems need and are very necessary. Of course, the redistribution of wealth should be the core issue, where we have to hold the businesses accountable, they have to respond to it, and how do we also, and the good part also for Namibia as a country itself, we are discussing all these developmental programs and agendas at the time when we are now putting our NDP 6 together. So it means that we have to take the SDGs to become the working document for development of our NDP 6, so that we don't have excuses of saying that, no, we don't have funding for SDG programs and those kind of things, or funding for what is going to be agreed on the park and all those kind of things. So I think that we have to start using our international commitments to drive and to be domesticated so that it can drive also the local development programs.
In relation to the quotation that you attributed to the UN Secretary General, namely that we certainly cannot be implementing a system for our grandchildren based on a system architected by our grandparents. What was created by our grandparents is not all bad, and we know that for a fact. So how does one strike a balance between retaining what was good from the current system, yet investigating what is toxic and what needs revisiting?
The issue here is about the foundation. What they built, our grandparents, what they built, was relevant then. But that does not mean that their foundations, where they built it, they cannot, because UN, we need UN. And UN was built by our grandparents. So we need now to reform the UN so that it can be responsive to the current generation.
Are you saying it's no longer relevant as is?
It is relevant because we need that dialogue. We need that interconnections, because globalization is there to stay. You can just fly here, go to Beijing, have a dinner and come back. So we need that cooperation. But however, we are not now in the war to the extent then it was created for. So we need to readjust it. We need to make sure that it starts responding to the current development, especially with the technological advancement and many more.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Shanika, one of the matters that you flagged earlier during your introductory overview relates to the digital divide. As a multilateralism expert in our country, how does one draw a balance between what is respected as sovereign to a state? Because certainly some responsibilities must vest in a state. Our 8th ICT Summit kicked off in the Namibian capital today, coincidentally. Namibia needs to accept responsibility for the digital divide, yes or no? We certainly can't blame international powers, other sovereign states, for what we are not implementing back home.
Yes, I do agree. But then you need to look at the decisions that are made internationally and the operational level. For example, if you were to, everything now is transmitted digitally. And if you are not prepared, of course, it is your fault. You have to ensure that your legislative framework is speaking or in tune with the reality of today. You have to set up a framework or legislative framework that is legislating in terms of the technology that is existing today, that is in use. I used to use example, for example, when we, at the independence, we used to travel with a passport. The picture is just laminated, and the passport name is written in ink. And when the challenge confronted us, so then we transformed to machine-readable passport. Now, if you're still using the ink, the passport written in ink, who is going to accept your passport? Nobody. So therefore, you need to move as the world is moving. You also need to ensure that you have a legislative framework that is speaking to the technology of today.
And the you that you're referring to refers to individual countries as
Individual
well,
countries.
specifically.
Yeah. If
Thank
you
you.
have problems, you seek assistance.
Thank you.
Because if you are lagging behind, I'm afraid you are going to. But also now to talk about the digital divide, we also need to look at, because the technology, or especially the artificial intelligence, it can overwhelm us if we are not careful. So we then need to strike a balance. The useful technology or the useful artificial intelligence, and that one that is bad.
Thank you. Thank you,
So we
Ambassador.
need to make a distinction.
Thank you. Madam, would you like to respond to some of these matters
Yes.
that have been raised?
So I think really what is crucial going forward is the international cooperation. How are we working together? Because I think if we are going to make headway, we need to see how to work better. And as we've said, you know, the divide is there, the playing field is not level, and the only way that we are going to level that field is by us working together and cooperating effectively in such a manner. And one of the things that will be the outcomes or the discussion during the Summit of the Future is also the global digital compact. And the whole idea with that one then is really to make sure that whatever issues we are talking about in terms of digital AI, Ambassador Shanika mentioned about AI, is then how are we, those who are far advanced than other countries, how are they going to share the information, share the knowledge? Because if they retain the knowledge, information, that's where then the divide just gets bigger and bigger. So these are some of the elements which would be looked at or addressed during the Summit of the Future. The Secretary General has come up also too with a special or high-level advisory committee on the artificial intelligence to be able then to really see how we can level that field around that. Because, you know, with COVID, what we've definitely learned was that there were some countries and within the countries which were far more advanced in terms of accessing internet connectivity, etc. So the issue then is how do we build on those good lessons which we learned during COVID to be able to move forward in terms of addressing issues. So I think these are some of the issues that we need to address as we move forward. There's one more point which you also mentioned, and this was about you know, the structures of the UN, which were adopted or established 1945, which is a long time ago. And the point is there have been some achievements, but the point is that in its current form, there needs to be change. And just looking from where we are, even here in Namibia and globally, the reforms of the Secretary General to even at country level, you know, to have resident coordinators, which before we had, but there were you know, UNDP resident representatives. So the idea was really to see how we could work better collectively under in a more coherent manner in a country. And so these reforms are, you know, they are, you know, some of the ways we are trying to see how the UN can be reformed. It's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, but the good thing is that the steps moving forward have already been established. So I think when it comes to young people, older generations, we talk now about youth and future generations, I think we still have to leverage on those intergenerational conversations, for example, because there are lessons which we can learn. It's not all bad, what happened, you know, in 1945, 1960, etc. But then let's pull on those lessons and build on what we are coming with the young people. Yeah.
Thank you. Sikabiwa, very briefly, the collaboration, the cooperation that Madam Pororo is talking about, that not only needs to exist because it's non-negotiable, but it needs to be effective cooperation. What is it that we need to do also as role players in country to ultimately achieve the global objectives?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that your question will tell to the first one that you asked, Madam Pororo, on the issues of trust. Trust can only be built on one thing, social dialogue. And with the social dialogue, we have already legal instruments that we ratified. We ratified Convention 144 of ILO, and in our constitution says that any ILO instrument that we ratify, it forms a integral part of our system.
Any international instrument, we need not domesticate it. That's what the Supreme Law states.
Yeah. We just have to work, but we have that convention. But if you look in the preparations to this summit, the debate in Namibia was nowhere visible. So I was expecting that the Ministry of International Relations of course, with the National Planning Commission, they will come robustly so that they can engage the citizen. So for them to understand what will our president and his team will take to New York when we are going to participate in this.
Are we engaging this evening according to you?
We are engaging now at least, but a bit late because the text are already prepared. You know, I participated in the UN Civil Society conference in May. So civil society across the globe, they were already preparing for it, and there was many texts that was there. But in Namibia, back home here, a bit the negotiations were not visible, except maybe 2 weeks ago when the Ministry of International invited everybody to come together and those kind of things. But again, we could do more. So we need to enhance the culture of social dialogue. The more we talk to each other, the more we build the trust, and we can own together the successes, and we can also own together the failure.
Thank you.
But if you are doing it in isolations, then when we come and highlight the weaknesses, you say we are critiquing, we are what, but I'm still prominent of the social dialogue.
Thank you very much.
Instruments around
Ambassador, we're not going to have time for an extensive rebuttal because we'd like to hear from the young people in our midst as well. But just very briefly, your response to what Mr. Kaviwa is raising.
No, I do understand the concern, but I just also need to remind everyone that...
Including Mr. Kaviwa.
Yes, the Ministry of International Relations did have a plan, but you have to know that in February, we had a death of the president, and that really impacted a lot. Yes, we have tried. The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, after he was appointed, he invited the President of the General Assembly to come to Namibia to speak to the youth, to speak to the legislators, to speak to a variety of stakeholders. That was done. And he was here. And he had a conversation with a wide range of stakeholders, including the bankers. There was a discussion which was held at the Bank of Namibia.
Thank you.
And of course, then the Ministry of the Minister invited stakeholders to brief them on the Summit of the Future. Of course, on Thursday, the President and the Federal Chancellor of Germany and the Secretary General of the United Nations, they are going to have another, what you call awareness raising.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm sure more of those particulars you can share with us during the course of our conversation.
There are a lot of things that have been done, and I have come to a number of times to this same room, talk about the Summit of the Future. Yes, I know it sometimes, and of course there are also a number of issues. All our statements that we have been making, whether it is SADC, whether it's the African Union, we also emphasize the Summit of the Future.
Thank you, Ambassador.
And our co-facilitation role.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
I know it's not enough, but my apology if that has not really been sufficient.
Thank you for your concession. Tapewa, it's over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Denver. We are definitely coming to you live from NBC One, bringing you a conversation, an in-depth discussion leading up to the Summit of the Future, which is taking place. That is, of course, later on in September. It's only right we engage our audience. As you see, the summit is about the future, and this is the future right here, right now. I'm joined by Kinisha Evanson from the University of Namibia. Kinisha, I want to find out from you, what do you think are some of the most crucial issues that should be addressed at the Summit of the Future?
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Kinisha Evanson. I am a student from the University of Namibia, and I've listened to what the panel has discussed, and I understand the Summit of the Future is to produce an action document pack of the future, and the one that I would like to touch base on, which is the financing of development projects. I took a few notes while our panelists were speaking, and I just want to understand how can international financing be made easy and accessible for African countries. I quote our current president, His Excellency Dr. Nangolo Mbumba, on this, where he mentioned at the China-African Forum about how can international financing be made easy and accessible to African countries. I have a scenario. Say, for instance, 100 billion or 100 million is then given to an African country, compared to that 100 million or billion being given to a country in the US. If we are then, as Africans, being given 100 or 100 million or billion, how long will it take us to pay them back compared to giving that money or that amount of money to a country or a city in the US? So my question basically is, how can international financing be made easy can be made easy and accessible to African countries?
Before I allow the panel to respond, I have a question for the madam. If we make it too easy for African countries to borrow more money, there is a school of thought that is of the view that we may then struggle to pay back this debt and land in bigger trouble. What are your thoughts around that?
I think in terms of that, at the end of the day, African countries are less developed compared to our countries on the other side. So I know we do need the financing. African countries do very much need the financing, and them paying them back is something that we have been struggling. Paying back finances on the other side is something that as African countries, it's not something new to us. It is something that we have been struggling with. At the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, we do need the financing, and I think we can move around or maneuver around the fact that paying them back would take us time, but we do need the financing. That's the most important part. Thank you.
And I also hear you call for more favorable conditions for African countries as far as these loans are concerned. But let's hear from the panel. Perhaps we can start with you, Mr. Kabiwa. Do we need a greater access to financing as African countries?
We don't need to borrow any single money from any person.
So how will we finance the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Africa have enough resources. We only need to sell our products for their value. And then we use our resources to build ourselves. We don't need to go and look for any international financing. We have enough money in Africa, including Namibia. So for me, I'm not prominent for the borrowing and whatsoever, and we need to make sure that the debts in Africa are the threats to human dignity in Africa. Because the way we are taking debts for consumption, not taking debt for investment in most cases. So it's very important for us to understand that we don't need those kinds of things. We have enough resources for the citizens. We have to get our priority right, and we hold each other accountable.
Ambassador, do you concur with that stance?
Well, let me respond to the question. Yes, I think one of the issues about the summit or the Pact of the Future, I think is to look at the global architect, that is including the international financial system. It must be reformed in the way that enable the issue that you are addressing now. So that even the representation, there must be a representation. I think also the issue that I have not spoken about when we are talking of the about the issue of the Summit of the Future awareness. The Vice President, Her Excellency Dr. Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, has a panel which is called Amani Africa. And on the 27th, launch a report. And one of the issues that are addressed in the report, it is about reforming the international financial institution so that those African countries that are borrowing, they must be borrowed in a way that enhances their development, not constraining them. And I do agree that when you are borrowing, you don't borrow for consumption. You borrow to finance projects that have long-term impact on the development of the country.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Yes, if I have to respond to his question.
Not elaborately, please,
no,
Ambassador.
I also don't believe in borrowing. Yes, we have enough resources in our country, but our resources, they are part of international financial system. So when we are reforming this financial system, it must also include the way our resources are extracted.
What do
They
you
must
mean,
be
Ambassador,
reflected in
what do you
the figures.
mean that our resources form part of the international financial system?
Yeah, because when you sell your resources, where are you going to sell? This is the bank that are financing those transactions. So everything must also be looked into.
Thank you. Madam, what is your stance?
Well, I think the point which I would raise, I think, has already been said in the sense that part of the discussions, Pact of the Future, it's talking about, reforming the international financial institutions. So definitely this is something that we need to look at, because the way those institutions are right now is that the grants, the loans are available, but the problem is the very high interest rate, and therefore it makes the debts even more higher. And once then that also puts us in a situation where whatever the country is earning in terms of earnings, it's now paying off those loans, and then you're not able to invest the money in development projects, development activities. So that's something that needs to change. But at the same time, too, there is money in in Africa, the money is there. But maybe what we need to be looking at now is really how we can better ensure that that money has a turnaround in terms of rate of return on investment, so that we are able then to, support some of these initiatives which we are having as countries as well, because the money is there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Tapewa, it's back to you and the team.
All right. Looks like Kinisha was not yet done. Kinisha, your final remarks?
Thank you so much. I do fully agree with what our ED just has mentioned. However, this question is directly to you, SG. You then have mentioned in response to my question is that we do not need to borrow these finances. I understand that these finances are borrowed for development, national development purposes. However, my question stands, when do you think we can reach a point whereby we don't need to borrow money from the other side and we fully make use of our current resources?
Yeah, I think you're slightly adjusting your question, which is perfectly fine. Perhaps you can also just give one of the other members of the audience the opportunity to ask if they have a question to ask at this juncture.
All right. Erickson Dinenge is also one of our audience for this evening, and he is from Triumphant College. Erickson, your question is, how can young people contribute to the success of the summit?
Thank you so much for the question. My name is Erickson Dinenge from Triumphant College. I believe that we need to trust one another. We need to build trust. We need to learn how to work together. And then we need to educate ourselves using the past to predict the future. So I think that is my point.
Any questions?
Currently no questions,
All right.
but I'll come for questions if I have any.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. For all of our viewers who are watching from home, you can also participate in the conversation. That is by calling us right here in studio on 061-291-3339, 061-291-3339. Denver, it's back to you.
Thank you, Dapewa. Thank you so much to you and the team. Madam Paroro, let's have regard to the extent to which the Summit of the Future plans to speak about climate change. That is a hot potato at the moment, as it should be, and also to the extent to which we'll have due regard to the commodity called peace, and what are we doing to nurture it where it exists, and what are we doing to bring it about in jurisdictions where it no longer exists or where perhaps it never existed.
Okay, maybe let me understand the question, because I hear you talk about climate and then peace.
So I'd like to hear from you. To what extent does the Summit of the Future plan to address climate change at the same time? And while we're at it, look at how we can restore peace on the continent and on the planet.
Okay, so yes, certainly issues around climate change are crucial. And when we look at the changing weather patterns throughout the world, we see that definitely we are having problems in terms of the climate and how it's affecting our economies. And I mean, when we look even here at Namibia, we know that Namibia has droughts, it has floods, droughts. So question is then, it shouldn't be something that shocks us, because I think it's only going to get worse with the patterns that we look at. Even as right now we are talking, we know that Namibia is facing El Nino, and already we have a whole good number of Namibia's citizens who are all struggling already to get food. So this is one thing I think that when we look forward, we cannot talk about a future without addressing issues around climate and what we need to do about climate. So definitely a lot of discussions, about now how do we get even financing to help us in terms of mitigating or even adapting to the climate change. And therefore, these different COPs that we've been having discussions around the world discussing climate are really to look for those solutions. But again, too, the arguments which arise then is that the effects of this pollution, which is happening in the world, is happening in developed countries, but is coming back and is affecting us then as developing countries. And then why should we now pay for something which we are not attributing to? So again, we go back to a situation where the field is not level. And how then are we going to be addressing those kind of discussions going forward? And this is something that definitely Summit of the Future, that those kinds of discussions will have to happen in terms of then the climate fund. How are we able then to support that moving forward? So that's one issue which certainly we have to look at moving forward.
Just one moment. You're touching on the resolutions taken at the Conference of the Party engagements, the COPs as we know them. And what you just highlighted is namely that the African continent does not significantly contribute to global gas emissions, yet we also pay the brunt of the consequences and the impact. And now we all have to pay to rectify the situation. There appears to be a lack of commitment on the part of some countries, particularly those making very serious undertakings at Conference of the Parties engagements when it comes to putting their money where their mouths are. What is to happen about that? What are we to do about that?
So I think, again, for me, the thread right there again is the trust. Yeah, we're back to trust, and the point is that if we are talking of a system which is going to work for all of us, and we want to ensure that we are leaving no one behind, then they have to see how they contribute. And this is where I think now it becomes important then I think pressure amongst member states, peer pressure.
Peer pressure.
Yes, peer pressure amongst member states also then will cause us to begin to address those kind of issues. Yeah?
And get countries to honor their commitments.
Yes, to honor their commitments. But the point is that it's something which you have to see how we can push, yeah? Because you can't now, well, you could use a system where now you make countries accountable for that.
Is it possible without such a system? Ambassador, you and I have spoken a number of times about exactly that. How does one hold one another accountable? And there might even be a correlation between our fight against climate change and the commodity called peace.
Yeah.
Because peace then could land under threat if countries do not honor their commitments. What's your take, Ambassador?
No, thank you very much for the question. I think really you have to look. We were talking of responsible consumption before we started.
As one of the goals, as one of the 17 goals.
Yeah. Now, this responsible consumption is also speaking to extraction of mineral, because in many parts of the countries, you have extraction of mineral that are polluting the water sources. And the marine resources dies within, and the people are exposed to various type of disease. So therefore, we need to hold each other accountable, because if the impact of climate change are felt by the community, and they are felt in the way that it disturbs their peace, then that is how the peace evaporates. And in all this COP, we are talking of equal but differentiated responsibility. Because those who are responsible...
We don't want to call them the culprits?
No. We can call them whatever, but the result is the same.
Yes.
The result is the same. Is that when they pollute, we feel the impact. I live in the Caribbean, and I have looked into the eyes of my colleagues who are coming from small island states. They tell you, we do not know how long our island is going to exist, because it can be submerged under the water.
Their home can be destroyed.
Their home can be destroyed. Those are realities that they face. It is a question, it's an existential security to them.
Thank you.
So therefore, let's hold those responsible accountable, and must also speak up. It is said
But
that
what does that system? What should that system look like? How do we're saying to each other that we need to hold each other accountable, and that message, that refrain gets repeated at COP every single time.
It is a question. It's a question of justice, equity, and fairness. But if we are not speaking up, even the Bible says, if we don't speak up, maybe the stone will speak on our behalf.
Very well. Mr. Kabira, let's hear you speak up. You've touched on the manner in which you felt the consultation didn't happen, as we're also preparing as a country for our role as co-facilitator. But from the perspective of civil society, how will you ensure just, equitable, inclusive presence and participation at the summit?
Yeah, I think that from the Global Society Forum, there are various documents that was prepared. The text was shared and all those kind of things, but that is at the global level. I wanted to see it more at the national level because the grassroots, they want to have to fit the decision at the global level. I don't want it to be other way around, where it comes from top to bottom. It should be bottom-up approach that I'm interested in. And this could only happen if at the country level, people embrace the culture of social dialogue. We should know that we only have one common denominator called Namibia, Africa, and the globe that we have. The unfortunate part, coming back to the earlier discussion, is that they are making for the issues of climate ideological issue.
Who's they? Who's they? Sir?
If you go now in political science spectrum, you will realize that President X, when he take over, have a different perception about the climate. This one have a different perception about it. So it's becoming a political issue, the climate. Whether that is the right way or wrong way, I don't know. But again, we have to take it from that angle that, of course, when we are engaging everyone across all the spectrum of discipline, we have to ensure that the only inheritance that we have is the earth. If we destroy it, we are not going anywhere. So it's very important for us to realize that we should never politicize too much the issues of climate, but we need to make it an integral part, and all of us, we have to defend it. And more especially, our resources must be geared towards that. The issues of tax reform is very important, because tax reform is the only thing that could add as a redistributive formula or ingredients. The way the international companies are evading tax and all those kind of things, but not holding them accountable. The way we are also not transparent when it comes to the issues of tax and borrowing and all those kind of things, all those are keeping us backwards. But the bottom line is that all our programs, we have to ensure that we fund it from ourselves and we work towards it aggressively to ensure that we protect Namibia, we protect Africa, and our resources work for us.
Thank you very much. Tapira, I'm sure the audience has a question or three still for the panelists. If they are ready, we'd like to hear from them. Remember that you, as members of the public, tuned in on NBC One or on the NBC Plus application, could also give us a call in a bit, 061-291-3339, 061-291-3339. We're talking about Summit of the Future. If you have any questions for members of the panel, you can do so in a bit. Tapira, it's over to you and the audience.
Thank you so much, Denver. I'm now joined by Iyalo. She basically wants to talk to us and also just add to that is Erickson's words, as earlier on we did ask him, how can the youth contribute to the summit? Iyalo, what do you have to say on that?
Yes, my name is Iyalo Shinjele and I am a student at the University of Namibia. I could quite resonate with what my learned colleague did share, that what we need is to contribute towards the whole summit is trust. But above all else, I really believe that young people can contribute through active participation, advocacy, and by bringing innovative ideas to the table. So they can mobilize on issues like climate action, digital equity and human rights, ensuring that the summit outcomes reflect the interests of future generation, and also just the youth involvement in decision making and processes that can help drive bold and forward-thinking policies. Also bringing us back to the question that in what innovative and impactful ways then can young people assertively engage and ensure their voices are not only resonated but actively shape in decision-making processes during the Summit of the Future, while also driving sustained influence on the implementation of its outcomes long after the event concludes. Thank you.
Yellow, you look like you're ready to participate in the Summit of the Youth. If we can just pass the mic on there to Seblon. Seblon, what question do you have for our panelists this evening?
Good evening. My name is Seblon Moses. The question that I have is has to do with climate change. We were discussing about climate change right now, and I'm an agricultural student, an animal science student, and I just want to know what are we doing as Namibia towards climate change, since it's really a big issue and it's affecting us as Namibians.
Well, Denver, I guess it's back to you and the panel.
Thank you so much, Tapewa, and thank you, Lord Tapandula Unine, and thank you, Seblon. What are we doing as a country ambassador to deal with climate change from an agricultural perspective particularly? And then we can also get into Lord's question after that about how we ensure that the participation of young people is indeed authentic and it will indeed reverberate long after the summit, as opposed to just window dressing.
Should I answer for agriculture?
What we are doing as a country to fight climate change?
Okay. Well, there are programs that are in places in the respective line ministries, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Agriculture. I mean, we talk of adaptations, we talk of to be resilient, and there are programs speaking toward those goals. But the issue of climate change, I think really we have to look at it in a holistic way. First of all, we have to prepare. Preparedness strategy is one of them, because you don't foresee when this is going to impact you. Recently, there was a story which people make a joke about when there was a decision taken to cull some animals to feed those people who have perhaps facing challenge.
With food security.
Food security. And of course, also within SADC, there are programs addressing food security issue. It's also something we talk as regionally. And that's how we must prepare, because we cannot just talk of climate change, the impact, but we are not putting up measures in place that are addressing those affected areas. Some are drought prone, some are flood prone.
In our country, we have some regions that are both flood prone and drought prone.
Yes, and of course, within SADC, we have set up the center, which is called SHOCK, that respond or that enable countries to share some of those information, as we need to have also early warning system that can predict when the weather patterns is likely to affect, and then you are better prepared to put in place. And of course, we work also with UN programs such as UN food programs and others.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam, talk to us about your perspective on how will we ensure, if we invite young people to the Summit of the Future, that we will value their contributions and that whatever they propose, whatever they recommend will indeed be implemented, that we're not just busy with window dressing.
Okay, before I get to that question, I want to just add on to the question which the young man asked about agriculture. And, you know, the United Nations in Namibia is working to support the government in terms of specific areas. So we have what is called the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. And within this framework, one of the pillars which we are working on is on environmental, transformation. There's another one which is also looking at economic growth. Within this, then, we have various entities of the United Nations, like the World Food Programme, which is then working on school feeding programs, for example, in order to ensure that, all children get access to meals And within the food, with the World Food Program, FAO, we are looking at, how we can increase productivity in terms of agriculture. And working with the specific line ministries, these are some of the things that we are doing. We are also looking to see how we can look at agriculture with young people in terms of enterprises along the value chain to ensure that, jobs are created, etc. So there are a number of programs which are happening also in terms of environmental, number of issues. Even with this particular El Nino, which we're talking about right now, we've managed to mobilize some resources, humanitarian resources, just for the drought, to be able to ensure that we supplement or complement what government is doing in terms of ensuring children, women, lactating mothers, etc., have access to food. So definitely agriculture is an area we are working on. More could be done, I believe. But again, I think we need to look at, the funding windows, etc. But certainly it's a priority in terms of our activities.
Before we proceed, if a young gentleman like Seblon, who studies agriculture and food science, wants to get involved in those entrepreneurial projects that you support along the value chain of agriculture, which are the avenues that he and his colleagues could explore to make sure that they don't only get valuable experience, but certainly also contribute to these efforts?
Okay, one program which I'm aware of is the one with Ministry of Trade and Industry, I think, which is called Empretech, right? And Empretech is dealing with those kind of, in terms of enterprise development, etc. So that's one we could look at as well. I think there's another one which the UNDP has, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's also, I think it's an acceleration lab or something, which also they could be those type of opportunities there as well.
Thank you very much. You wanted to touch on as well, I would like for you to touch on how will we ensure that the youth representation actually matters and makes an impact and a difference. Madam Iyalo's question.
Yes, okay. So I think, okay, for a long time before I joined, the resident coordinator position, I was working on youth unemployment, right? And one of the issues which I think was often a struggle and still sometimes is a struggle is the umbrella body representing youth, right? Because I think when youth are not organized, it becomes very difficult even to get your voices heard. Because then if it's a couple of you, on whose behalf are you talking about? So I think it's that framework of, how you mobilize yourselves to become, a force that we are going to listen to, rather than listening to scattered voices of young people, because I'm sure there are many different groups of young people in Namibia. We have the National Youth Council, which is also an umbrella body and has got young people under there, which is great, but is it representing all the voices? Probably, probably it would be, but I think then how do you come as a collective in order to be able to get your voice, your opinions heard? And for the summit, I think now the discussions are going on. Even I am aware that there's already online, there are discussions which are happening for young people prior to the summit, I think starting on even tomorrow, for the next three days, where they'll be discussing financing, etc. But it's young people. So these are the conversations which you join in, and you also then be able to talk on Namibia's voice. Now, for me, what I think is more crucial is after, the recommendations of the pact, right? Because the summit of the future is happening. Now, the next step, which will be important then, is now the pact of the future. How are we going to implement it here? What does it mean for you as Namibians youth? How are you going to mobilize yourselves to be able to have your voices heard in that? I think, was it Mr. Kabihuha who spoke about the National Development Plan number 6 processes which are ongoing. So right now, these are those good opportunities. We could already begin to see how your voices come into that. We are also, as the United Nations, finalizing our cooperation framework. How do we hear your voices? So one of the critical things, I think, which still needs to be done better is engagement of young people. Yeah, because we talk a lot about we want to hear your voices, you must make decisions, and all of that. But the question is then...
How sincere are we?
Well, first of all, is how sincere are we? We might be very sincere, but the second part is how is the youth coming as, mobilized?
As an organized collective.
Yes, as an organized collective. That's a good word, yes. As an organized collective to want to hear their voices heard. That's what I think is really critical in moving forward.
Before we get into more particulars, we'll take a look at 2 more inserts, and then we'll get the conversation going once again. Welcome back to our very special program called Path to the Future, focusing on the Summit to the Future. Now, whether you find yourself in Gibeon or Ludritz or Gobabis or Swakopmund, Katiba Mulilo or Shakati Rundu, or in the Namibian capital, and you have a question for one of the panelists, perhaps you have a question for one of the members of the audience, we'd love to hear from you. 061 291 3339. 061 291 3339. Please switch off your television set or move away from it to avoid any confusion. Keep your questions, your contributions brief, to the point, and certainly always respectful. Tapewa, it's over to you and members of the audience.
Thank you so much, Denver. If you're only joining us right now, you definitely did miss out on an hour of our special broadcast that is on in-depth discussions leading up to the Summit of the Future. And with that said, I am with my audience right here, made up of students from the University of Namibia, the Namibia University of Science and Technology, as well as Triumphant College. Are we still here, guys? Is the energy still there? Yes. Awesome. Now, I do have three of you who have questions for our panelists. Perhaps we can start with you, Daniel.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Amtenya, medical student at the University of Namibia. I have a question, but before my question, I'd like to give a food for thought. Should we as Africans really be concerned and be politicizing the issue of climate change, as opposed to going to these discussions and saying, we want to reform our industry so that we are not merely extractors of raw minerals, but come to our countries, invest in our industries as in line with the SDGs, so that we are able to play a part in global reform as well. My question is then directed to Madame Pororo. How do we then, or how does the UN hold governments accountable post the summit with the implementation of the SDGs? How sure are we that this government will go back to other countries and implement the SDGs? What measures are there in place to hold these governments accountable? Thank you very much.
Would you like to respond now, or shall we give more members of the audience the opportunity to ask their questions? What do you prefer, madam?
Either way, I'm okay. We can go back, and or I can respond.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Shall we allow it to respond?
Yes.
Thank
okay.
you.
So thank you so much for the question. This was Daniel, right? Thank you.
The future doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Future doctor. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, it's an interesting question that you are posing in terms of how will the UN hold governments accountable, right? So I think one of the things which you have to remember about the UN is made of member states, right? So when Namibia goes, as in His Excellency President Mbumba goes with his delegation, they agree to certain commitments, right? So the issue is that when they come back now, there are frameworks which are in place. And in this case, you would have Namibia has, the 2030. It has also the 2030 vision, and then it has also the national development plans. And this is the mechanism in which the country is using to say that they've achieved these goals which they've outlined, which are related then to the SDGs. So it's when they go to these meetings, they then also you have the national voluntary reports, right? That's where now then they are done periodically. So Namibia, when for example, it might feel that they want to have a report which talks to issues of SDG number 8. So this is where then they'll report on what they've done pertaining to that specific report. 2015 was midway for the SDGs. Namibia, other countries have an opportunity to say how far they are in terms of achieving those objectives. So it's really at the country level where the countries will be held accountable for reporting on what they've achieved. Now, when we look at the Pact of the Future, though, is that, we still have another 6-7 years towards SDGs. So now the question is, are we going to have achieved the SDGs that the country has talked for? Where we look at right now, it doesn't look good, right? Because it showed that, or the report from the ASG this year showed that we were badly behind, right? Was it this year or last year? I think last year, that we were badly behind. So now the issue then is, or the conversation now is, how are we accelerating, right, to be able to achieve the SDGs? One example which I would like to let you know is that, for example, there's a number of transitions which were identified by the SG in terms of acceleration. And Namibia, one of the ones which it signed for, was to accelerate when it comes to jobs, social protection, and jobs for just transition, right? And so Namibia will get then a catalytical fund, but it's got to work closely with the UN to make sure that whatever it's going to do to accelerate the resources the Namibian government will provide. So it must be owned by the Namibian government, and it's not a small UN project, but it's just catalytic to what the government of Namibia is doing. So these are a number of let me say, accelerators which will happen. There's one on food, for example, another one on environment. So they're different, but for Namibia, given the issue of high unemployment of young people, is the one which they're looking at with social protection and jobs for just transitions.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. Yes, very briefly, please.
Yeah, I want to make a contribution to your question. That is not UN way to keep like our government
accountable.
We, the citizens, have to keep our government accountable through various structures. That's why the regional coordinator earlier talked about you, the young people, should have been organized yourself. So when the delegation of the president is returning from New York, you should have a debate with him or with his delegations that now come, bring what you assign in New York, and we have to make sure that we keep them accountable. And in every debate that we are debating, whether at the university, in your own faculty, link up with those, because there is 60 action issues of the PEC. So those 60 action issues, you should pick up which one is relevant to your faculty, which one whatsoever, so that in any debate, we link it to this international commitment that we made. But the bottom line, unfortunately, no one will come and keep the government accountable on your behalf. We the citizens, have to pull it up. And that's why the voluntary reporting, the trade unions, we also prepare what we call parallel or schedule report. The government have their report that they take on the development of SDGs. We also have our report that we take in terms of our analyzing the figures. And the problem that we have is the data. So we can keep the government accountable only if we're informed. And that tells you that now we as the citizens, we have to become interested in all our dealing and national development plans so that we be able to keep them accountable.
Thank you. Also very briefly, please, Ambassador.
Yeah, I think the resident coordinator had put it nicely, that the UN is a member state driven. It's not the UN that holds countries accountable, but the member state and the citizen, as it was alluded to. But sometimes you are students, how many of you have interest, even if in knowing either it's the national development plans or the national voluntary that was talked about here? So sometimes those things, you see them on TV, but do you have interest in going and interrogate them so that then you can say what is done is not done in our best interest?
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Right.
It does sound like Mr. Tapewa was recommending that we shouldn't be sleeping, none of us, and also interrogating whether or not we are interested as young people. Back to you, Tapewa.
Thank you so much, Denver. So the question to you guys is, are you ready to hold government accountable, seeing that you are the youth and the future? All right. Tapewa, the floor is yours.
All right, good evening. My name is Tapewa Nakashona. I'm from the Namibia University of Science and Technology, and I am a marketing student as well as a presenter from the radio station. So before I ask my question directed to the panel, I just want to touch on the question which Yalo posted about youth involvement and all that. So I generally believe, just to post my thought on that, is there is no channeled procedure, or we don't have a pattern of coming back to also accountability. So I feel like government is there, like late Honorable Hage Geingob said, government is there to provide a platform. So there should be a channel that comes up and says, this is the channel, let's hear what the youth want. When the youth come in, and like the representative from the UN said, when the youth come in and say this and how they have brought themselves, and then governments sit and provide the platform. Once the platform has been provided for the youth, and then the youth use that platform, and then after can we have accountability. Otherwise, we will keep having a back and forth of, you're not giving us jobs. and you're not giving us, because government cannot provide a platform when the youth is not being innovative to say, here is what we want and here is what we can get. So my question now, pausing on the 10th SDG goal, which is reduced inequalities. Looking at the summit of the future, we cannot shy away from the fact that there is always a scramble for investment. Looking at many countries having a mixed economy, so many investors from the private sectors come to scramble all these the goals with different projects, getting tenders and all of that. Are our governments ready to implement projects to ensure a better balance? Yes, by Vision 2030, Vision 2040, there should be jobs, but will we have a balance of people receiving a balanced salary? Because we have people now receiving, we have things like green hydrogen coming up, for example. If 2-3 years from now I'm a marketer, I can be earning 20 to 30,000 in the same building with someone earning $1,000 to $2,000 being a domestic worker. Do we have projects that are there to ensure that even though there is a gap between me and a domestic worker, is the standard of living balanced with the economic distribution?
Tapewa, your Mbushe came to serve the fire.
I'm telling you. So I'm going to let you answer that one, and then you come back to me for our last question for now.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kabiwa, what is your stance on what we're doing in terms of proper programs to ultimately reduce inequality? It's an open secret that Namibia is the second most unequal country on the planet. Are we doing enough to deal with that? And to what extent are we making optimal use of the emerging industries to help alleviate the problem?
Yeah, I think that is true. We are the second highest. That is only the metal that we are consistently having in our lifetime is to be unequal society. So, but the question remains, why? And what are we not doing right? 34 years, we can't blame about it. We can't do that.
Why
so
not?
The issue here is
Why
a
not,
structural.
Why not?
Why not is because the time that we have, that we are in charge of our destiny is more than enough. The issue here is a structural issues. That the financial sectors is there, it's not touched whatsoever, and that one that control everything. So, on the issues of salaries, of course, you heard comes January, we are going to have a national minimum wage of $18 whatsoever. Although it will be a bit delay for domestic and some other workers, but at least we are trying to move towards that to see how best we can address those kind of things. And also from a trade union perspective, this inequality is also brought by the deficiency of labor standards within the trade agreements and investment agreements. If you want to draw a foreign direct investment into a country, there should be a labor chapter into that, so that the social issues can be taken care of. So we have intensified from our side that the workers should have a say in trade agreement, in investment agreement, and this will be made public. And there's a very, very aggressive campaign also for Namibia to subscribe for the extractive industry EIT, Extractive Industry Transparency International. Yeah, for Namibia to subscribe for it, so that our mining contracts can be made public, and you know that whoever mining your resources, these are terms and agreements that they agreed upon. The most important thing is that we are not benefiting from our resources. And the moment we structurally start addressing those uncomfortable topics of economy, we'll get it right. Look at the Botswana now. They make it bluntly say that De Beers, let's have 50% share. If you want, pack and go. So, but Namibia, we haven't boldly make those decisions to address the inequality.
Mr. Kaviwa, just two matters. Are you happy with the minimum wage of $18 per hour? Is that a decent wage, number one? Number two, we are a constitutional democracy governed by the rule of law, and we have one of the most progressive supreme laws of the land on the planet, and we also have a very progressive Labour Act. Are you saying that those legal instruments are not sufficient to deal with the manner in which the investors employ our Namibians?
They are not at all. The issue here is that, you know, that the reason why Ramatek closed, what was the reason? Very simple, because workers start demanding the decent wage. We're talking about minimum wage. But from our side, we want decent wage.
Is $18 per hour decent?
It's not decent at all. But at least it's some way to start something.
Thank you. Thank
so
you very
that
much.
we will start improving on that kind of things. But the most important things is that the social chapter in all those agreements must be included.
Thank
so
you
that
very much.
whoever comes here, I don't agree that you have a mine, although you have a mine somewhere there, you can't even say that, no, you, the mining company, tied up this road. But those, they are destroying all those kind of things. So
Thank you.
we have to go back to basics. Social dialogue is very important. Social dialogue, social dialogue. We need to entrench social dialogue. Let's talk to each other.
Yes, Ambassador.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think when you are talking to the issues, first of all, I think we need to, first of all, we are talking of the Summit of the Future. The main, or the central issue is that when we are going to the future, we really need to examine our attitude. Are we going to the future with the attitude of the past? Or we are going to have an attitude that speaks to the future? The Charter of the United Nations, among the preamble that I have cited so many times even here, speak to promotion of social progress and better standard of life in larger freedom. How, when we are talking of investors, when the investors come into a country, they come to invest. Now, they invest in accordance with the legislative framework that is put up. Now, if that legislative framework is not speaking well, is it not our responsibility to ensure that it is revisited? Just in the way here we are saying, the Summit of the Future is addressing the issues that are not speaking, that we cannot go into the future because they were designed for our grandparents. So when we are when we are inviting investors, there are framework, legislative framework upon which we invite them. And one of the issues is that when we extraction, there must be value chain, so that these resources that are extracted, they must be transformed into a finished product in our country, so that they are able to produce or to provide job opportunities and the skills, know-how, so that tomorrow, if this investor is not obeying our laws and they close up, then there is a skill in the country that can continue. I think if we really look into the issue and we to look into with on the understanding what the countries need, not just to portion blamed. This country is ours.
Ambassador, while you have the floor, Ambassador, in terms of our role as a co-facilitator, are we heading to the summit with an attitude of our grandparents? Or how are we ensuring that we, as co-facilitators, not heading there with such an attitude?
As co-facilitators, we are to facilitate, to ensure that, again, as I said at the beginning, the multilateralism work, because we can sit together and agree so that we can restore trust.
But how prepared are we for that role? Because it's a very serious and important
it's a serious
role as co-facilitator.
Let me just tell you, as we are talking now, the 78 sessions is coming to an end next week. We have a number of countries that have broken silence over the Pact of the Future. So the co-facilitators are now engaging those member states that are not happy, so that we can, at the last minute, at least come up with the Pact of the Future that agreed up on by consensus, that the leaders who agreed on.
To break the pact. What is the expectation in terms of what consensus should be reached about?
Of course, on those issues that many member states have disagreement on. So at the moment, the co-facilitators are working around the clock to talk or to engage those delegations that are not happy, to see to it that they find a language that is acceptable to all. Because once you certify the one that is not happy, and then the other ones say, oh, no, we are also not happy with this. So you have to find a language that is acceptable to all. And the clock is ticking. And it's a challenge.
Thank you, Ambassador. Madam, because the clock is ticking, there is a chance, and one has to embrace that reality, that there might not be consensus. But what is your take on that matter?
Okay, I think in terms of all these documents which are so political, because these are political texts, I think Namibia as co-facilitator working with Germany, I think they've come a long way from where the whole process started, right? The initial text, I think, was 120 pages. And now it's down to about, is it 28 pages?
As the clock is ticking.
As the clock is ticking. And I think the idea, too, is that, we've said that there are 60 actions within the document. So I think it's already a lot, but they've come a long way. So, of course, they probably would not be total 100% consensus, but I think if the majority is in agreement with this document, I think it will move forward and will push it forward. And from where I'm sitting, I would like to believe that the co-facilitators have been really working behind the doors to ensure that this text moves forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would like to say that ultimately the summit will come out with something for sure. But of course, when you write these documents, it's when that discussion is happening in New York, then our colleagues from the permanent mission probably won't sleep for those 2 nights because they'll be working on this document. Yeah. So there's a lot of lobbying in the corridors. There's a lot of discussions. There's a lot. It's a heavy job to do that. Yes. But I do believe that we will have this document out. Yeah.
Thank you.
One point which I just wanted to really quickly before Ambassador says is just to go back to the inequality story, which I think was raised there. And I believe that, when you look at Namibia's economy, right? Namibia's economy for long has relied on minerals, right? Or that's where our wealth comes from.
It wasn't diversified.
Yes. And when you look at the jobs, you can't get too many jobs from the mining sector because these are very high capital intensive. So I believe that, the push by the late President Hage Geingob with the green hydrogen was already a way of looking towards the future. And so jobs will come out of that. Of course, you're not going to get all the jobs now because now the process is, kicking off. But the opportunities are there, and because the opportunities are there then, is how then are we skilling ourselves as young people to be able to take advantage of those opportunities? Not even just at the level of, you guys at NAST and at University of Namibia, but even vocational training centers, plumbers, welding, and all of that. So the opportunities are there, but the point is then, how are we adapting our curriculums to be able to take up those opportunities? So it's these emerging sectors which I believe the jobs will come from. And this is what then I think the discussions must continue as to which those sectors are. Agriculture is one, but we can't be doing it the way we've done it before. Let's look at value addition. So those are the things to be looking at in terms of then addressing some of those issues and working closely with investors. We have the Namibian Investment Development Board, and those are the institutions then to be able now to work, partnership, collaboration within the country is crucial as well.
Thank you so much, Madam. Of course, responsive and agile curricula, we will need more of that. Tapewa, it's over to you and the members of the audience.
Thank you so much, Denver. Yvette, it's over to you.
Good evening. My name is Salome Yvette Chongarero. I'm a student at Triumphant College. And my question is for Mr. SG. And it is one of the talking points, number 17. And it is, how is Namibia collaborating with international organizations and other countries to achieve the SDG?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Is that it for now?
Yes, Denver, that's it for now. You can take it away. All
right. Also, just to remind the viewers, if you want to participate in this evening's conversation, if you have a question for one of the esteemed panelists, the number to dial is 061-291-3339. 061-291-3339. Mr. Kabiwa, Sustainable Development Goal number 17 speaks about collaboration, speaks about partnerships, speaks about effective cooperation that we also heard about earlier in order for us to jointly, to collectively, to severally achieve these development goals?
Yeah, I think that Namibia, at the level of government, is members to many international bodies. It plays a major role in many activities at the international level as a state, and also the non-state actors are also collaborating with other international bodies. You take it from one organization I'm coming from, we are a member of SATUC, which is a trade union for SADC. We are members of I2C Africa, we are a trade union for Global, also members of I2 Globe. And we are also playing a major role because there is also what we call the major group and and other stakeholders body within the UN system, which bring the civil society and other players also so that they can contribute to major documents like this one.
Mr. Kabelo, my sincere apologies. Can you just park your thought for a moment, please? We have Joel all the way from Swakopmund in the Orongo region on the line. Good evening, Joel.
Yes, good evening. It's Denver speaking.
Yes.
Yes, Denver has got actually two questions. The first question is, yes, it's a summit of the future.
Indeed.
Now, if we talk about the future, we talk about something tangible. Now, I've heard about documentation and corridors and whatever the thing may be. Now, I mean, action speaks louder than words. Documentation is what to bring us forth. We come a long way with documents that have been pushed back and forth within the corridors of the United Nations, and now they're going to be pushed over to Namibia. And I've seen that, and I've even heard that the panel speaking so defensively about this document. We don't need documents at the end of the day. We want to see results, tangible results, and that are going to be, in line with the future that we're talking about. The second one is, I've heard and I've overheard one of the students, the marketing student from NAS, stating that whenever the youth come up with a demand, then government should come up with a platform. Now, since government is there to create an enabling environment, in other words, the platform for the youth or for anybody must be there. They should not wait until something has been asked or a demand has come forth. Now we have to create a platform. I think in that way we're not going to get anywhere, because we're talking about the future. The future is that you have to be prepared. You have to prepare today for tomorrow. I think that's the direction of the future. But to prepare for today and for tomorrow, I don't think that's anywhere in the future.
Joel, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
In the end, those were more comments than there were questions, Mr. Kabiwa, but you also spoke on the manner in which the young people should hold the government accountable upon their return, the delegation from New York, and to create their own platforms. And if a platform is created, to make their voices heard, and whether you want to amplify your sentiments in that regard. But the questions around goal number 17 for greater collaboration, of course, still stands. Could you just keep that brief, please?
Yeah. I think that I've already that we have coordinations, and even the UN at the country level is also coming up with a cooperation framework that will be also discussed moving forward. At least in this cooperation framework, the UN tried at least to bring the government, the civil society organizations, and all the role players together. See, how do we collaborate? How do we harness resources? And also the issues of capacity. If the more we're fragmented, the more we cannot coordinate and we cannot enhance capacity, because within a system, one organization might have some expertise there, the other one expertise there. But the most important thing is that if we institutionalize our social dialogue so as to know what the other parties are doing, we will coordinate better. And that is what we are doing at the country level. But of course, we are also collaborating throughout the globe.
Madam Pororo, Joe also said that we talk a lot and we have many documents, but we need to see tangible results emanate from the summit. What's your Leonard take?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Joel, for your question, for your point. And I think, yes, lots of documents will come out of these meetings, but even at the country level, lots of documents. But the point is that where you say we want action. Now, I think the point is that the action is then you as citizens making that action happen. Because the UN, yes, we produce those documents, but we don't produce them in isolation. Member states are the ones who are also part of those processes. So the point now is if we want action, we will support as the UN in terms of like probably providing technical expertise, capacity building, but at the end of the day, the ones who are going to be accountable is the government. And you, as a citizen of the country, you then have to then be able to hold the country accountable for those actions. So that's at the end of the day, I'm throwing it back to you as well, because you have a role too in the country as well, because you are a citizen of the country. So as Mr. Kavihuha mentioned, is that us as the United Nations, then we have our cooperation framework, but we are supporting government. We are not doing the work of the government, we are supporting the government.
Ambassador, I'm also hearing Madam Pororo hold us accountable while we are at it, that we need to walk the talk, we need to lead by example, we need to practice what we preach. There is consensus that there's global struggle regarding the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Where do the key challenges lie for Namibia, and what does our commitment look like to deal with those challenges?
First, let me touch on the documents.
The many documents.
The many documents.
And the many talks.
That was, I think, the point of Joe from Swakopmund.
From Swakopmund.
Now, when you go to the United Nations, every country has a position which is informed by its own policies. Here we were talking of a National Development Plan or the Vision 2030. Now, it is not the position that you will go with to the United Nations and say, this is how we want things, or this is how we do things from Namibian perspective. Another country will come with its own point of view. And whatever document that is going on, it is speaking to the priority that each country has set. Now, it is now, if you have not set your priority right, it's unfortunate. So therefore, it is important that when you are going to any multilateral platform, ask yourself, what are my priorities? What are my objectives? Are they speaking to the need of the people that I'm leading? So that when you go there, they are reflective of those. Now, if you do not have a document that set your priority and your target, how are you going to pursue?
You might as well stay at home.
Yeah. So you need to set your priority right. You have to benchmark them realistically. And you have to ensure that these goals are attainable or they are deliverable. So you don't just set goals just because you want to set goals.
Yes, but again, Ambassador, where are our struggles and what are we as a country doing about our struggles?
Our struggle, I think, as far as this Sustainable Development Goal, it varies. We have talked of in terms of agricultural, food security, we are drought-prone countries, those are challenges. Then you talk of in terms of quality educations. So is our education speaking to the need of the countries? Here we have students here. In a few years, they will graduate. Now, when you graduate, what you have learned from the university, will it enable you, or does it speak to the needs of the job market? Those are the questions that we have.
The youth unemployment figures tell us that they're not, particularly the graduate unemployment figures tell us that they are not.
So now, everything that you do, you look at the problem that you have, and you say, how are we going to address this? So it must speak to the needs, to the problem that you are experiencing.
And ours are speaking to the problems?
Well, I'm not here I'm talking of the Summit of the Future, but I'm saying, as a person from the Ministry of International Relations and Multilateral Relations, I am responsible for the multilateral policy.
Very well. Thank you, Ambassador.
I'm not responsible for agriculture. I'm not responsible for what. But I'm saying the role that a country plays, it plays in terms of the policy and the target that it sets.
We're unfortunately in a serious race against time. We'd just like to hear from Dapewa and the audience again as we're starting to slowly wrap up our conversation this evening.
Well, that's right, Denver. Now for our last question from the audience tonight, Feni will be posing. Feni, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm Feni Shongola, a public management student from the University of Science and Technology. And my question is directly to the Secretary General. I'd just like to ask, how can we then renew and refresh the currencies of our society, including enhancing innovation skills in regards to, or in the context of the Summit of the Future and inclusive of the SDGs?
Is that it from you and the team, Dapewa?
That's it. For now, for myself and the team.
Tapandulao nene.
Ewa.
Mr. SG, they don't want to leave you in peace and alone, it seems.
I think that the question also to the previous interventions, where I said that the results of this Summit for the Future, it is well positioned, unlike the SDG. Because when the SDG came into existence, we already had developed our NDP 5. So now, when we're implementing SDGs in terms of allocation of resources, it was a bit complex because this is a big plan. You have already a plan here, so the financing of SDGs become a problematic. But with this one, we are in a better position because we are in the process of developing our NDP 6. So whatever coming from New York now, we have to see best how can we, based on the 60 actions that are there, which one we can include them into our national development so that they can be costed through fiscal and those kind of things.
But are we an innovative people as Namibians? Do we sufficiently prioritize innovation?
This is a difficult question, that one. Because I'm coming from the pressure group called trade unions. And from our side is that we have already positions on many things. We have to deal with the issue of inequality. We are not...
But through innovation?
Yeah. Through innovations, I was saying that we have to look at what the architects that we have, financial architects that we have, how do we reform it through the innovations? How do we deal with the issues of job creations? How do we deal with the issues of establishing a supply chain? All those kind of things, the proposals are there. But whether are we getting them through to the government, because unfortunately, if we don't have that clear dialogue where we can exchange notes and agree on various actions and hold each other accountable, we share information, it will be difficult.
Can you agree that we had a clear dialogue this evening, Mr. Kabiwa, for the record?
On this one, we had at least discussed around it, but whether in the document that went to New York, we inputted in that document is the question to be
Remains
answered.
to be seen according to you.
Yes.
We've run out of time, unfortunately. Just your brief concluding remarks on the way forward.
Yeah, my conclusion remark is that as we are coming back from, those that are going, Ambassador, as they are coming back from New York, hopefully you also call us so that they can tell us, and then we have to roll out to you, the young people, to the universities, get the interest. When they come out, get their numbers, engage, let's engage. Let's engage. The information will never come itself to you. You have to go and hunt for information.
Thank you.
So you can lead the horse to the water, but don't make it to drink. So it's very important. Let's deal with it. Thank you.
Ambassador, your final thoughts before we allow you to go get ready for New York?
You can be rest assured that if you come to me, I can give you my number now. I will not run away from you. I will answer any question you have given to me to the best of my ability. If I'm not able to answer it, like what Denver was trying to say, I will find a way to sneak it. But the question is that the Summit of the Future, as we were talking during the break, is that we need to every citizen of the country need to really look into it. And we say to ourselves, this is the future, either for our generation or for our succeeding generation. How do we want, after the path of the future is passed, how are we going to look at this path of the future and apply it into our own country? Is it going to speak to our need and priority? How are we going to prioritize, whether in terms of the program that we are putting up, so that it speaks to our needs, but it is us, we the citizens, that we have to make the future for us. And we cannot.
Thank you,
and I
Ambassador.
want to tell you
We've
that
run out of time, unfortunately, Ambassador.
the Summit of Future is not a promised land, that we can make it a promised land that we can walk through.
Thank you,
And
Ambassador.
the land and the honey and milk can flow. But we have to make it possible.
You're saying you can't run away. We'll catch you, Ambassador. Tapandula Unene. Madam, you have the brief final word this evening.
Okay, thank you. So 2 quick points. First point is innovation. Innovation, I believe, exists in Namibia. Question is, how do we incubate it and how do we make use of it? Yeah? So that's one thing which I think is critical, and it's, I think, something which probably, we need to look more at, but it definitely exists. There has to be innovation. But then it's how to promote and also then incubate, etc. Second point is, I think, now in terms of what next. Yeah? And I think what will be very crucial following the Summit of the Future is now for us to collaborate. NBC, media, the different entities, universities, how do we all build such that we are all going to own what is coming out of the Pact of the Future? The SDGs were there, but I think the point is, even when we talk as who knows the SDGs, it's probably a lot of government, but does the citizen out there sitting somewhere in Tsumkwe, do they know what the SDGs are? And yet they are contributing to them. So the point is, I think it's how now we pack that in terms of dialogues, in terms of media, in terms of conversations like this, NBC, and use all the different platforms we have in order to see how we take the whole issue forward, taking opportunity of NDP 6, as has been mentioned, and other frameworks which are being developed in Namibia is crucial.
Thank you, Madam. As far as the NBC is concerned, our promise remains, it's ours.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gentlemen, lady, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing expertise so generously. Please travel safely, Ambassador. We can't wait for you to be back and invite you back here. And if you do run, we will catch you. Thank you for that promise. And thank you also to Tapewa and the audience for your fantastic contribution and presence and keeping us on our toes this evening.
Thank you so much, Denver. Thank you guys for coming through. Are we ready for the Summit for the Future? Yes. Amazing. Well, from myself and Tapewa and the entire team right here, it's thank you so much for tuning in and goodbye. But back to Denver to say his goodbye. Let's wave.
Thank you so much to Tapewa and the Future. Thank you also to Tatenanda Shipawu, who was the sign language interpreter for this episode. And thank you for the team who worked relentlessly and around the clock to make this production possible. We value your contributions as well. And from me, Denver Kissing, and my panelists, it's bye-bye.
Choices can make or break the future for generations to come. In just 100 years, humanity has made extraordinary progress. But we've also gone from this to this. This generation has a duty to consider how our choices will impact the 10 billion people who will be born before the end of this century. Using data and foresight tools, we can understand our world more clearly, envision a brighter future, and together make better choices. We can build a thriving, sustainable planet for future generations where everyone has equal rights, poverty and hunger are no more, quality healthcare is accessible, peace prevails, and technology offers opportunities for all. This September, world leaders will gather at the Summit of the Future to decide on a declaration on future generations, recognizing the exponential impact of our actions today for tomorrow, paving the way for our common future.
For people with disabilities to have a better future, it is crucial for them to be involved and for them to participate in decision-making and policy development. People with disabilities should be asked about their opinion, their views, and their perspectives.
There should be accessible information, fairness on an equal basis,
people with disabilities are not consumers of societal help, or they don't need help, just they need inclusion.
To build a world in which disability isn't a bad word, in which young people with apparent and non-apparent disabilities are able to be loud and proud in who they are, and not to feel like it's a deficit, not to feel like disability is something to be ashamed of, but to really feel that it is an asset to their lives and to the people around them.
I want to see an improvement in feeding and nutrition for children with disabilities so they can fulfill their rights to health, participation in community living, and education.
Another thing for the future is equal access of support.
To build a better future, we must always remember that girls with disabilities in education must be at the forefront. They are the center of their communities, they have knowledge base, and we have so much to learn from them. Let's not forget them, let's learn, and let's build a better future for everyone.
The Summit of the Future is about how we cooperate at the global level to solve our biggest shared problems. And that includes the problem of not having implemented and not having reached some of the goals that we've already agreed, including the Sustainable Development Goals, the principles of the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and so many other goals and agreements that we've already reached that would really deliver the future we want. But it's also about how we cooperate to address the new opportunities, fast developing digital technology such as AI, and how we minimize the risks of some of those developments. It's about how we solve problems at the global level, how we work together, and how we deliver a future that is fairer, more sustainable, and better for all of humanity, and not just the few who benefit these days from these developments.